Okay.
Yes,
Okay, so let's start with a very short arriving practice. So everyone, semuanya, Professor Garfield, I'm sorry, but I'm going to lead the sessions in Indonesian for
that's
our
fine.
friends. Okay, okay. So ayo teman-teman kita duduk tegak, duduk yang nyaman, ambil postur yang nyaman. Oke. Kemudian eh, tarik nafas panjang 3 kali dulu. Inhale and exhale. Rasakan bahwa tubuh ada di sini sekarang. Inhale, exhale. Tahu, sadar bahwa ada di sini sekarang. Sekali lagi, inhale and exhale. Dan jika Anda merasa nyaman, Anda boleh memejamkan mata. Merasakan postur tubuh sedang duduk, merasakan titik-titik sentuh di tubuh, mungkin sentuhan telapak kaki dengan lantai, atau mungkin tungkai kaki, merasakan sentuhan tangan, mungkin saling bersentuhan, mungkin tangan dengan paha atau dengan bagian tubuh lain, merasakan sentuhan pakaian dengan tubuh, dan mungkin ada pemikiran yang muncul, kita kenali, kita mungkin dengan ramah kita berusaha untuk mengizinkan, dan kalaupun pikiran itu tetap berlangsung, it's okay. Kita sekedar mengenali, mengakui bahwa, oh ya, ada pemikiran di sini. Mungkin juga ada emosi, ada mood tertentu yang mungkin hadir bersama kita di sini ketika kita duduk di sini. Lingering around. Kita kenali, kita izinkan, dan mungkin kita bisa mencoba untuk bersikap ramah. Mungkin juga ada dorongan-dorongan, hal-hal yang harus kita kerjakan, dorongan-dorongan untuk rencana-rencana untuk hari ini, rencana-rencana untuk masa depan, yang mungkin terasa urgent, mungkin terasa harus segera kita kenali, kita akui bahwa ada di sini, dan jika memungkinkan, kita bersikap ramah dan kita izinkan. Dan mungkin bersama buah pikir, bersama dengan mood, emosi, dengan bersama dengan dorongan-dorongan tersebut, mungkin ada sensasi tubuh yang terasa, mungkin terasa lebih dominan. Sekedar kita ketahui, kita akui sensasi dari sensasi tubuh yang dominan tersebut mengizinkan bersikap ramah terhadapnya. Tidak perlu untuk dengan sengaja mengarahkan perhatian pada bagian tubuh tertentu, sekedar hadir bersama tubuh, sekedar izinkan sensasi apapun yang mungkin terasa lebih dominan, sekedar hadir dan datang, dan mungkin Anda dapat merasakan pergerakan sensasi, pergerakan dari perut, abdomen, sekedar izinkan sensasi tersebut hadir bersama-sama, tidak perlu dengan sengaja mengarahkan perhatian padanya, hadir, bersikap ramah, dan mungkin sedikit ingin tahu, curious, momen demi momen, hadir bersama pergerakan dari abdomen. Membawa kembali perhatian, merasakan seluruh tubuh yang duduk, membawa perhatian untuk merasakan jari-jari tangan, membuat gerakan-gerakan kecil, sembari merasakan seluruh pergerakan jari-jari tangan, bawa perhatian ke jari-jari kaki, membuat gerakan-gerakan kecil di jari-jari kaki, merasakan seluruh pergerakannya, narik napas panjang, inhale, and exhale. Sekali lagi, inhale, and exhale. Dan kapanpun Anda siap, silakan membuka mata, kita kembali ke ruang Zoom. Hmm. Okay, so I think everybody's back. I hope they are not sleepy after the practice. Okay, kita, Professor Garfield, please allow me to introduce you. I'm going to introduce you and read your series in Indonesian. So, and the other way, I will try to introduce you to you, our Chan Indonesian community, and I will do it in English to you, but I'm going to do it in Indonesian to our Indonesian friends to introduce you.
That's great.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Ya, saya akan memperkenalkan Profesor J. Garfield ya. Jadi Profesor J. Garfield adalah dimention sebagai salah satu filosof dari 50 filosof paling berpengaruh di dunia selama dekade terakhir ini. Beliau adalah Direktur Program Studi Buddha dan Program Studi Tibet di India di Smith College. Beliau juga adalah Profesor Filsafat Buddha di Harvard Divinity School, kemudian Profesor Filsafat di University of Melbourne, dan juga kemudian adjunct Profesor Filsafat di Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies. Beliau adalah penulis, editor, dan sudah menulis lebih dari 30 buku, lebih dari 200 artikel, bab, ulasan. Kemudian penelitian Profesor Garfield ini membahas topik-topik dalam dasar-dasar ilmu kognitif, kemudian filsafat pikiran, sejarah filsafat India modern, filsafat metodologi, Enlightenment Scotland dalam cross-cultural interpretation. Kemudian tentu saya dalam konteks acara kita hari ini itu topik-topik dalam filsafat Buddha khususnya Madhyamika, Indo-Tibet dan Yogacara. Okay, so yeah, Professor Garfield, I've just introduced you to our
Okay,
audience about your.
sorry.
Yes.
I think your voice is lost.
Oh, okay. Where was I? Terakhir aku di mana, Ko Yohan?
I'm hearing you fine.
Oh, okay.
Plus where apa-apa lah.
Okay. Yeah, yes.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So in context of today's event, Professor Garfield, so I think uh, it, our community itself starts in the I think in the early 2000s when Pak Agus starts to practice with Venerable Master Sheng Yen in Dharma Drum Mountain. New York. So, and then after he came back, he started to the community in Indonesia. I myself started in 2009, something around that. And then in 1998, when Mr. Agus was starting to learn about the Tibetan Buddhism, one of his main book was actually written by you. The book about the Nagarjuna's Mulia Madhya Karika. So yeah, and then in the COVID time around 2020, Mr. Agus and Mr. Johan was actually very interested in your talk in Sravasti Abbey, which also has Venerable Tibetan Children. And actually, Venerable Tibetan Children came to Indonesia quite a few times and was invited by one of the very famous monastery in Jakarta area actually, and I actually attended one of her sessions as well at the time, and I think regarding this event is that our our Serkong in this context, Master Sheng Yen, Venerable Master Sheng Yen, advised that whenever we see a great teacher, we should at least try to create a karmic affinity, a good karmic affinity with them, plant the seeds, and then, of course, and if it's possible, of course, we want to learn from a great teacher. So in this context, it's from you, Professor Garfield. And so in those 2020, I believe Mr. Agus and Mr. Johan has contacted you. But then because of the constraints of the pandemic, and I think you were also teaching at the time, online teaching, doing a lot of online teachings at the time. So we didn't have the sessions at the time, but we are very grateful that today we can have you in this session. So yeah, that's pretty much about our community, and a little bit more about our community is actually we are mostly practitioners. Frankly, I don't know, but Agus probably has read more than thousands of books in Buddhism. I myself, I don't have that much, and I believe I can represent most of the audience here. Perhaps we know about mostly about the very basics of Buddhism, so the Four Noble Truths and etc. I think we have that basics, but Mahayana readings is very scarce in Indonesia. We have to find most English books, I think, in order to be able to learn. But thank you, the internet, so we can have easier access nowadays. And yeah, I think that's pretty much from me. Pak Agus mau nambah ya?
Saya hanya nambahin teknis saja. Kawan
Okay.
yang butuh
Oh yeah.
terjemahan bisa dengarkan yang bahasa Indonesia. Mungkin Sugi atau Taswan kasih caranya gimana yang mau pakai opsi bahasa Indonesia.
Oh,
Oh ya,
okay.
itu sudah ditulis sama Taswan.
Yeah,
Jadi
di
silahkan
chat room.
kalau yang butuh versi terjemahan, ya silahkan baca di chat. Oke, dari saya udah. Oke, next.
Okay. So Professor Garfield, may I just confirm with you just one thing? So, is it okay for someone to, raise their hands because we have that yes, raise their hand, and then probably they want to ask you directly a question
Please,
in the session.
please.
Is it okay?
I would,
Okay.
I would very much like that. It's much nicer for me anyway, and I think for you, if we interact and we talk and we have a conversation, than if you just listen to me talk, because I get very boring very quickly. And it's much, and I also am very good at confusing people. So if you stop me at the moment when I confuse you, then you can get deconfused much faster. So
Okay.
please make this a conversation and not a lecture. And yes, use raise hand is the easiest way to do it. Or you can just shout out.
Okay. So yeah, so Professor Garfield, I think they understand already about if they can ask anytime. I'm going to tell them in the chat box that they can either type the questions on the chat box, or if they want to speak to you directly, they can just raise their hands later. Okay.
Absolutely.
So
I won't
okay.
monitor the chat, so somebody else should tell me if there's a question in the chat.
Yes.
Because
Oh, okay.
I'll be looking at
I'll be
people's
the one.
faces, not at the chat. Okay.
Okay, I'll be the one. I'll
That's
be the
great.
one. So
Thank you.
I'm going to do a translation for you as well if the questions is in Indonesian. Okay, so don't worry. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Time and place is your, please.
Thank you so much. And look, I am not a great teacher. I'm just an old guy who spends time thinking about Buddhism. But I'm extremely honored to be visiting your community. So I'd say it's my first time visiting, even virtually, an Indonesian community, and I take that to be a real honor and a great pleasure. I like to begin, as my teacher always liked to begin any session, by reminding us to set our motivation, because as Mahayana practitioners, our motivation is always to gain enlightenment, to gain awakening in order to benefit all sentient beings. We're not here just to do idle speculation. We're not here to have arguments to see who's smarter than whom. We're not here to just enjoy ourselves by doing this instead of watching football. We're here to actually make ourselves better agents for change. And so it's important to set that motivation, to remember that that's what we're doing, and to remember, as my teacher once told me, and he did this with his finger wagging at me, remember, every syllable of Buddha Dharma is about ethics. So everything we talk about is about making us better people. And that's what our quest is. Okay? Join me in that motivation. So your community sent me through Agus 11 questions. And they're each very profound questions that we could spend a lifetime on each one, but we don't have lifetimes for each one together. I mean, we may have that many lifetimes, but we'll be separated. So we're going to address them as concisely as we can, but because they're each difficult, and because I may, as I say, be confusing, and because I'm not a very good teacher, please stop me and please press each question. Our goal is clarity. It does no good just to let my voice or a translator's voice wash over your ears and not take anything in. Only if you find that you're understanding should you let me keep going. When you stop understanding, stop me. Promise that. Because otherwise you've turned me into a terrible teacher, and that's not fair. Okay, so I'm going to begin with that first wonderful question on causality and nirvana. Which is a question that I remember bothered me enormously when I first started studying Buddhism. It struck me as maybe a deep problem within Buddhism until it was explained to me. And then it sort of became clear, and I'm hoping I can present some of that clarity to you. So the question is this: if everything operates under causality, that is, if everything is conditioned, how is it possible for conditioned phenomena to lead or result in an unconditioned phenomenon like nirvana? What does it mean to say that nirvana is unconditioned? And that always perplexed me. And I wanted first lean into the perplexity, into the confusion, because we're of course taught that practice is a path to cessation, to nirvana. And that if we don't practice and we don't study and if we don't hold that path close, then we're never going to reach that cessation and we'll be stuck within samsara. So you would think that if we do reach that cessation, and we're told the Buddha reached that after many countless eons of practice, what's all that practice for if it doesn't get us to nirvana? And if we need it to get us to nirvana, isn't nirvana conditioned by all of that practice? So now what we have to do is to give two very different answers to the question. And I've heard both of them, and I think they're both very useful, and they're completely consistent with one another. I'm going to first give what I think of as the most basic answer, but I think it's not the deepest of the two. The most basic answer is this. In one sense, nirvana is conditioned. That is, it is the effect of all of the conditions that we produce through our practice and through our lives. In that sense, it is, I'm going to give you three answers actually. It is conditioned, but once nirvana is attained, the question is, do we require further conditions to remain in nirvana? And there the answer is no. That once nirvana is attained, nirvana is a permanent state without the need for any conditions to continue. So while I may need a great deal of practice in order to get me there, once I'm there, I'm there. Just as if you were coming to Australia and you came here by plane, you would fly and you would fly and you would fly and you would fly. But then when you arrived here, you wouldn't have to fly anymore. And you wouldn't have to keep flying to stay here. So you could say Australia is an unflown place or is a flown place. Well, it's flown because you fly to get here. It's unflown because you don't need to keep flying to stay here. So that's answer number one. So that's giving us just an ambiguity. Answer number two is a slightly deeper, more interesting answer. And answer number three, I think, is deeper still. So answer number two is this. Nirvana is not a positive phenomenon. In Buddhism, we can distinguish between positive phenomena and negative phenomena. Nirvana is often described as a mere negation. So in the Indo-Tibetan tradition, it's regarded as a non-implicative negation, a negation that doesn't imply anything else. So when we talk about nirvana, we are talking, remember the metaphor. And this is, I guess, also really important for understanding this. Buddhism, as you've begun to learn, I hope, is saturated by metaphors. And there are reasons for that. But one metaphor that saturates Buddhism is the metaphor of fire. So in the Fire Sutta, the Buddha says, bhikshus, the world is on fire. Material form is on fire. Sensation is on fire. Perception is on fire. Personality is on fire. Consciousness is on fire. Nirvana is the cessation of that fire. So nirvana literally in Sanskrit means blowing out a candle. It's a negative thing. The fire is positive. The fire is always there consuming us. That's the fire of samsara. That is dukkha. We are people who are burning constantly. Nirvana is the cessation of that fire. Now, we can always ask what the causes and conditions are of any positive phenomenon. So we can ask what leads to this fire. And the answer to that, of course, is attraction and aversion grounded in confusion. That's the second noble truth. The truths, the causes of samsara. And, you know, if we had a physical fire and we said, gee, look at that fire, what caused it? We might say, well, somebody lit a match and there was firewood and paper and it started to burn. And then there was lots of oxygen and there was more fuel, so it kept burning. And the continuing fuel leads to it continuing to burn. For the positive phenomenon, we can always ask, what are the conditions that maintain it? But suppose you come to a house that's not burning, like say my house right now, thankfully, and you say, why is that house not burning? Well, what am I supposed to say? There's no positive thing that's happening that causes the house not to burn. It's just that the causes of burning aren't present. And so given that nirvana is a cessation or a negation, we can ask for the conditions that cause it to get us to that sensation. So I might say, oh yes, it was burning yesterday, but the fire department came and put the fire out. And then say, but why is it not burning today? There's no answer to that, right? It's just not burning. That's all there is to it. So we've got lots of the causes and conditions to get to that sensation. But when you've got something that's a mere negation, it makes no sense to ask what its causes are. There's nothing there to be caused. So that's the second answer. And it drives us to this point of seeing nirvana as a negation. And it's very important to see, as I say to my used to say to my students when I was still teaching, in Buddhism, everything positive is negative. And everything negative is positive, right? The really good things are all negations. And the really bad things are all positive phenomena. And so when we say that nirvana is a mere negation, that's a good thing, but it also means because it's a negation, we can't ask what its conditions are. So that's the second answer. The third answer might be take us to a deeper understanding. Nagarjuna in Mula Madhyamaka Karika reminds us that there's no difference between nirvana and samsara. He says there's not even the slightest difference between those two. And a lot of people read that and they think that's just crazy. Of course, it's a gigantic difference, right? Nirvana is blissful and tranquil and unconditioned. Samsara, we're burning and it's terrible and it's full of dukkha and it's conditioned. There's certainly a difference between those two. But the point Nagarjuna is making is that nirvana is not a different realm, a place that we go, like a heaven that is free from all of the things in samsara. Rather, nirvana involves living in samsara without dukkha, which means living in samsara without attraction and aversion, which means living in samsara without confusion. So it's really important to see that it's not as though once one attains nirvana, you disappear and go someplace really nice, like you fly to Hawaii or something. When nirvana, attainment of nirvana or attainment of awakening means inhabiting the place you've always inhabited, but just inhabiting it the right way rather than the wrong way. And so one way of saying that nirvana is unconditioned is to say that there's nothing special about nirvana that requires a particular cause. It's not in the difference between nirvana and samsara. It's in us. And the transformation that we're looking for is a transformation of our own mind. There's no conditions that transform this world into nirvana that condition that. Instead, the conditions are all conditions of our own mental state. So those are three different ways of explaining why we would say that nirvana is unconditioned, even though all compounded phenomena are conditioned. Does that help a little bit? Okay, are there questions about that? I want to pause to make sure. Okay.
Teman-teman ada sorry Prof. Teman-teman ada pertanyaan dari penjelasan barusan?
Itu tadi pertanyaannya si Taswan. Jadi
Yeah.
yeah, it was a Taswan question. So Taswan already clear.
Clear. He said clear.
I'm glad. Okay. I'm happy. And am I speaking clearly enough for the translation to proceed easily? That's working? Excellent. Thank you,
Easy.
Johan.
He said easy.
Okay. Second question that arose, a very difficult question as well, about applying philosophy in meditation. So I'll first read the question. How can we practically apply Madhyamaka and Yogacara perspectives during meditation? And when is the best time to do so? When active problems or distractions arise, or during subtler states of mind? Okay. the term meditation that we use in English, I don't of course know what the term is in Indonesian, but we're translating a Sanskrit term and sometimes a Tibetan term. The Sanskrit term is bhavana, which means cultivation, making us better, growth, you might think. And the Tibetan term, which I kind of like even more, is gom, which means to become familiar with, familiarization. So the point of meditation on the Buddhist path, and one of the reasons why when we kind of look at the Eightfold Path, meditation comes right near the end. Notice that view comes at the beginning and meditation comes at the end. And everything in between involves putting that view into practice. And then you might want to ask, why do we need the meditation coming at the end? And the reason for that is that meditation, by familiarizing ourselves with what we know to be the case, familiarizing ourselves with the correct view, with the motivations for correct action, with familiarizing ourselves with correct speech, familiarizing ourselves with correct effort, and so forth. It's one thing to know about these things intellectually and to sort of practice them externally. It's another thing to see the world that way. So I always think of Buddhist practice as achieving a kind of expertise. And let me use some examples from just ordinary life to give an analogy, and then maybe make this more specific. Suppose that you were studying a topic like, oh, I don't know, botany. So you wanted to become a plant scientist. When you begin, you're going to be told about all of these different kinds of plants. This is what a palm tree looks like. This is what an oak tree looks like. This is what a lichen looks like, and a fungus, and so forth. And so you're taught what characteristics to look for. This is the difference between this kind of elm tree and this kind of elm tree. Look at the shape of the leaves and so forth. And so you learn all of that. And when you go into the forest and you look at these plants or trees, you look at one and you say, now let me think. What kind of tree is that? What characteristics does it have? What does it not have? Aha, I can deduce that it's this kind of tree. At that point, you are not an expert botanist. You're a good student, but you're not an expert. When the expert goes into the forest, she just says, oh, that's this kind of palm. Oh, this is this kind of oak tree. This is this kind of maple tree. And they simply see the tree as what they are. Or if you've ever looked at an X-ray with a radiologist, you look at the X-ray and all you see is a fuzzy area. And the radiologist says, this might be cancer, or this is an abscess. And you say, well, it's just a fuzzy area on the screen. You can see it, and then the radiologist can explain why it looks like that, but the radiologist just sees it. A large part of gaining expertise is learning how to see the world in an expert way. Does that make sense? Now, gaining expertise in Buddhism, gaining expertise in living is the same thing. And what meditation does is it transforms what we know analytically and what we know conceptually into just how we see the world. Now, this is the preamble to the answer to this question. So the first thing to say is, when we look at meditation, it's familiarization or cultivation. It's enabling us to come to see the world the way that we know that it is. That's hard. That's why meditation is hard work. Now, of course, in the Buddhist tradition, there are many kinds of meditation. There's single-pointed meditations. There are open awareness meditations. There are metta meditations. There are karuna meditations. There are analytical meditations. So I want to focus now on analytical meditation because I think this is where we're going, where this question goes. If you remember the Heart of Wisdom Sutra, you've all read the Heart Sutra, right? And when we read the Heart Sutra, it tells us that at the time of the teaching, the Buddha was engaged in a particular kind of meditation. It's a meditation called the profound enumeration of phenomena. Now, a lot of people just brush right over that, right? Okay, so the Buddha's meditating. Let's cut to the chase. I want to hear that form is empty and emptiness is form and all of that. So yeah, the Buddha's meditating. I want to get to the good part, right? The thing about the Heart Sutra is the whole thing is the good part. And the fact that the Buddha is meditating on the profound enumeration of phenomena is extremely important, because that is an analytical meditation. That's a meditation where I take an object of meditation. Suppose, since I'm here in my office, I take a book, right? Here's the object. I say, it looks to me like one thing. In fact, it's 500 pages, each of them made of paper, held together by glue with a picture on the front. But each one of those pages is millions of molecules and bits of paper and bits of ink. Each of those molecules is composed of many, many atoms. Each of those, right? So I'm doing that enumeration, where I come to see that at one level, this book is just a disturbance in a quantum field. It doesn't even exist as an object. At another level, maybe this book is a piece of possible income. I could sell it. Or maybe it's part of how I earn my livelihood. Maybe it's a collection of pages. Maybe it's a single book. All of those things, right? Now, that's an analytical meditation. When I do that, I come to see, as the Buddha saw, as Shariputra saw, as Avalokiteshvara saw, that the book is empty of any essence of its own. Any way that I define it is defined only in relation to the way that I see it, to the way that I experience it, in relation to its parts, in relation to its existence as a part of a larger whole, that the book has no intrinsic identity or self of its own. That analytical meditation takes me to that Madhyamaka insight. That analytical meditation could also take me to a Yogacaran insight. It could be, gee, my awareness of that book is simply an instance of the dependent nature, the paratantra svabhava. That is, all that's happening is light is bouncing off of that, pressure is happening on my fingers and so forth, that are causing processes in my sensory organs and in my brain, and I am then representing all of this as a book. The subject-object duality that I experience when I say, here's me, here's the book, is completely an illusion. That the book exists only as a stream of cognitive, of causally connected processes. That my awareness of the book is nothing more than my being embedded in the same cognitive and causal processes that the book is. That for that reason, that the book that I imagine to be there is empty of the nature that I think that it has. That's the consummate nature of the book. That's also part of an analytical meditation. So the way that I think of this, there's a beautiful verse by Zongmi, the great Chan patriarch, whose work I'll bet you have read, where Zongmi says, may my mind be a brilliant mirror that reflects the teachings. May the teachings be a way of polishing the mirror of my mind. And so part of what he is saying is practice and philosophy are no different. Doing philosophy is practice. And many of our meditations that are most important to us are philosophical meditations, as in the Heart Sutra. And so the place that I would say to be using Madhyamaka and Yogacara ideas in your meditation is not to be waiting for a problem, not to be waiting until you attain a deep jhana, but rather at the very beginning, saying, I'm going to meditate analytically on my object of meditation, and I'm going to try to come to see the world as a Madhyamika sees it, to see the world as a Yogacaran sees it, to fuse those two so that I can see the world as somebody who both has the teachings of the Madhyamaka lineage and the Yogacara lineage sees that. That's the way that I would be thinking of it. Does that help a little bit? I think that the moment we distinguish meditation from philosophical reflection, we've constructed a duality. And in my own experience, dualities are always problems. Rather to recognize that meditation can be philosophically analytic, and we can do our philosophy through our meditation, as Zongmi advised. Any questions about this answer to this?
Yes, Professor Garfield. I'd like to perhaps a follow up on what you just explained to us. I don't know much about these analytical meditations. I assume this is something more into the Tibetan Buddhism practice, because I heard about the debate practice and so on. And for me personally, in Chan practice, we are usually not encouraged to think that much. And usually we are encouraged to stick to the method, stick to the
Yep.
method and not to think that much. So it's interesting because you were talking about Master Chong Mi, and maybe perhaps you can elaborate more how Master Chong Mi actually encouraged this uh, analytical meditations in context of the Chan practice. That will be very much
Yeah.
interesting. Thank you, Professor Garfield.
If we read Chogmi's great treatise on the origin of humanity, it's a beautiful treatise that takes us through all of the different philosophical systems, including non-Buddhist Chinese systems, non-Buddhist Indian systems, and through the different Buddhist schools. And when we read that text and we say, so if we're not supposed to be thinking and reflecting, why does he write this text that's about the origin of humanity, that takes us through each of these different systems right up to Chan, right? Which of course is the highest system. It's of course a Pangjiao. It's a doxography. And a lot of Tibetan textbooks are written in the same way, starting with the lowest system, bringing us up to a higher system. And the reason for that is the expectation that as practitioners, we begin really stupid. We begin in the lowest system, that the lowest system we can find is the one that defines the way that we ordinarily see the world in our everyday deluded lives. Now, in order to move from that level to the next level, you can't simply move from that level. Like for Zongmi, it was Confucianism, right? So we can't just start there and say, but I want to jump straight from there to Chan. He's pointing out that there are intermediate steps. The next thing to do is to see why Taoism gives us a refutation of Confucianism and a slightly deeper way of seeing things. Then we can come to see maybe how Vaibhashika systems from India are slightly better than that. Then and so forth, right? Now, if that's the nature of the practice, and that's definitely a book for practice, then there's an assumption that we are going to be meditating on those systems, on what they get right and on what they get wrong at each stage. And that's a meditation. So one way to look at that is to ask ourselves what single-pointed meditation is for, or what blank mind is meditation is for, or what open awareness is for. And I'm going to give you an analogy. And this is one that I think comes out of a beautiful essay from Dogen. It's the instructions to the Tenzo in Shobogenzo. It's very important that you sharpen your knives. But you don't, if you're a cook or Tenzo, you don't sharpen your knives in order to have sharp knives. You sharpen your knives in order to cook. When we are practicing single-pointed meditation, or when we're practicing open awareness meditation, we are sharpening the knife of our mind. We're making it more focused. We're making it more aware. Or we're practicing metta meditation. We're making it more caring of the world. We're doing things we're sharpening our knives. But we don't sharpen our knives in order to have sharp knives. We don't sharpen our minds in order to have sharp minds. We sharpen our minds in order to use them, to make them wonderful instruments, to make them that clear mirror that's going to allow the teaching to inform us. And I think that Master Zongmi's point is that what we're doing in those meditations is making it possible for us to meditate on the Madhyamaka, the Yogacara, the Chan traditions, in order to come to see the world through them. Meditation's hard, as you know. Cooking is hard, as you know. But if you try to cook with dull knives, it's much harder. So we begin by sharpening our knives. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, that actually makes sense. Thank you. Just a quick question from Hendrik. Is it because Chongmi also learned the Awatamsaka philosophy from Tushin, Master Tushin? Yeah, which is you know, as we know, because we know that Awatamsaka is also influenced by Madhyamika,
Yep.
and that causes that he's using the philosophy as a meditation practice. What do you think on this, Professor Garfield?
Yes, that's coming very much from the Huayan tradition. But he also studied the Chentai tradition. So he studied a number of different important Chinese traditions, each of which emerges both from Madhyamaka and Yogacara. And I think one part of the genius of Zongmi is synthesizing these into a new practice and a new approach. Thank you for that. Other questions about this question? Such a good question, such a hard question.
No, so far.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I'll come to number 3. This is maybe one of the deepest ones that can take us a lifetime to answer. And I'll say some things that may strike you as radical. So it's on first-person perspective and intrinsic existence. Prasangika Madhyamaka argues that all phenomena lack intrinsic existence. However, every conscious experience, and in parentheses, qualia, I'm going to put a big question mark on that one, is necessarily given from a first-person point of view. Question mark on that one. Even experiences that appear to be from a third-person perspective, like watching oneself or playing a third-person video game, are still ultimately experienced from a first-person point of view. This seems more obvious in first-person experience. Are we eternally confined to a first-person mode of experiencing? Even states like non-dual awareness, awakening, or dreamless sleep, if they're experienced at all, seem to be experienced from a first-person perspective. Does this suggest the subjective character of experience has some kind of intrinsic existence? If not, how would a Prasangika Madhyamaka philosopher deconstruct the apparent necessity of the inherent reality of the first-person perspective without denying the conventional reality of experience? This question is like my life's work, okay? I have spent most of my life arguing that we need to get past the myth of first-person givenness and first-person experience. And that one of the deepest insights of Prasangika Madhyamaka is that that is the basis of primal illusion and confusion. So now I'm going to say radical things that come out of the Indian and Tibetan Prasangika Madhyamaka tradition, but in the West come out of philosophers like Wilfrid Sellars and Ludwig Wittgenstein and Martin Heidegger in the 20th century. So these are ideas that we could approach from the Western perspective or from the Buddhist perspective. I'll approach them from the Buddhist perspective since we're in a Zen teaching now, but I might sometimes use language drawn from the Western perspective to explain them. Now, one of the aspects of Prasangika Madhyamaka that Chandrakirti, great 7th century progenitor of the Prasangika tradition, emphasizes, and that many people find really strange and really hard to get their mind around, is the rejection of reflexive awareness. In Sanskrit, swasamvedana or swasamvitti. And so when we talk about reflexivity of awareness like this, and this is a doctrine that comes primarily out of Yogacara, but also out of a lot of the Tathagatagarbha tradition, we think of reflexive awareness as being this immediate consciousness of the cognitive state that we're in when we are in that state, the special immediacy with which we know cognition. And in Western tradition, that's called the first-person perspective, or for me-ness, or I-ness. And so the people of the Western tradition who have emphasized this most powerfully are people like Edmund Husserl and contemporary Husserlians like Dan Zahavi, Evan Thompson, other people like that. Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa, the great Prasangika philosophers, encourage us to get rid of that, to recognize that that's an illusion. And I want to explain to you why that's an illusion. and why thinking of experience through the special first-person experience is probably a deep mistake. The first thing is that if we even pay attention to what we learned from the Yogacara tradition, that the parakalpita svabhava, that is the imagined nature, is characterized by the superimposition of subject-object duality on primordially non-dual experience. The moment we implicate subject-object duality, we have structured our experience in a way that is not simply the way experience flows, but in a way that makes sense for us as a kind of illusory representation of our relationship to the world. So when you say, I'm subject and the world is my object, notice what you're saying. You're saying, I'm not in the world. I'm outside of the world looking at it. The moment you say that, you realize you're crazy, right? You realize there's something seriously wrong. If you have to say to yourself, here's my relationship to the world, then you've created the duality of self and world. It's dangerous. The one aspect to that is seeing the world as something different and me as outside of it. The other aspect to that is equally dangerous and is maybe the other side of the same coin is seeing my access to the world as always mediated by my senses, my 6 senses, the external 5 and the internal 1. But my access to my inner world as immediate, not mediated by anything. And then I suddenly think that I have immediate knowledge of my own mind and only mediated knowledge of everything else. And that gives my mind a status completely different from everything else. Then I can start to think, oh, everything else is subject to causes and conditions, but not my own mind. Everything else just happens, but I'm absolutely free to do whatever I want. I'm unconditioned already. It allows me to think that when I look inside using my introspective sense, that there are no possible illusions. That when I look inside, I see my mind just as it is. As Tsongkhapa says, if that were true, we would all already be Buddhas. Because all you'd have to do if you want to know the nature of mind, you wouldn't have to sit on a cushion and practice for years. You would simply go to the Zendo. The teacher would say, look inside at the nature of your mind. Got it, you're done. Now you're fully awakened. Please leave. And that's crazy because we are just as subject to illusions of consciousness, to illusions of our own experience, as we are to external illusions. I mean, after all, that's one reason why we have psychotherapists, right? You go in and you say to your psychotherapist, I'm really happy these days. And she says, no, you're not. And I say, no, everything's going really well. And she says, I can tell you're really angry. Now the question is, who am I going to believe, me or my psychotherapist? I'm actually paying all that money because I think she's got better insight into my mind than I do. And she probably does. And so all of this suggests that we are just as subject to introspective illusions as we are to external perceptual illusions. Moreover, when we introspect, while it might seem like what we're doing is just turning an external eye inward, which is a strange thing to do, right? Because if you did that, all you would see is like brain stuff, right? But if we think we're turning our inner mind, our eye inward, and just seeing what happens to be there, right? That is what Sellers called the myth of the given, that somehow our inner life is just given to us. We forget our role in creating that. We forget that what we're actually doing is constantly recreating our own minds and consciousness. And unless we understood the processes of it.
Could you try again?
Sure, is that a question?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. That was
I
some
think
artifact.
Coach
Okay.
Aspan, mute dong, please. Thank you.
Okay. Something said I didn't get that. Could we try again? So I was going to try again, but I think it was an artificially generated voice. Maybe it was in my own mind. I don't know. So anyway, Anyway, we forget that if I introspect and I say, right now, I believe that I'm talking to people in Indonesia. It's not that I look inside and I find lying on the floor in my mind the sentence, I'm talking to people in Indonesia. There's nothing in there to see. What I'm doing is interpreting my own cognitive state. Using that sentence, I'm talking to people in Indonesia. I'm saying that just like what that sentence means in English, that's how I'm thinking right now. What does that mean, though? That means that whenever we introspect, we're introspecting through the categories of language, through our own conceptual categories. And we already know that language and conception constantly construct and distort whatever they present to us. So we know that our own access to our own minds is no different from our access to the external world. So it's not that we have trouble escaping a first-person perspective. The problem is that the only perspective we ever have is a third-person perspective or a second-person perspective. And we mistakenly believe that we've got this special first-person perspective. So when we look at the fundamental confusion that is at the root of cyclic existence, the fundamental confusion that gives rise to attraction and aversion, one aspect of that confusion is that I am a self as opposed to a person. And what part of what it is to be a self is to be immediately transparent to my consciousness, to just be present immediately as I am. And that's an illusion. All of our access to ourselves, to who we are, is conceptualized, is interpreted, is conditioned. And so I would say the real answer to this question isn't that there's a problem about how do we escape the first person perspective. The problem is, why do we keep thinking there's something special about a first person perspective? So I want to say that insofar as I know myself, then I'm an object of knowledge. If I'm an object of knowledge, I'm delivered through epistemic resources, through pramanas. If I'm delivered through pramanas, there's a possibility of error. If there's a possibility of error, there's no special first person perspective. There's just experience. And experience is like that. Experience is the kind of thing that is always illusory. And if you think that you've got behind illusion, that's the greatest illusion of all. Other questions about this one? Because this is a difficult and deep issue. And it's an issue that people really fight about in Buddhist studies and in the philosophy of mind. And I think it's because that apparent first-person perspective and that certainty we have about our own inner life is so compelling that it's a very hard illusion to shed. And discovering that you don't know your own mind and in any way different from the way you know the minds of others and external objects is a hard thing to come to know. Yes, Anders.
Yeah, so I'm so glad I can ask you this question, because when I was doing my master's, I stumbled upon the Vigraha, what's it called? The Vigrahavyavartani.
Yep.
And that text really helped me understand this perspective.
Yeah.
Can you say, because the thing that I really got out of that was the thing about function, that he didn't talk about that, for example, emptiness.
Yep.
It's the function of emptiness is to dispel illusion. And that was a real breakthrough for me. I was wondering if you can say more about that.
Yeah. Now that's a complicated text, of course, because it's a text that is a reply to Nyaya objections to Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And so part of what makes it complicated is that Nagarjuna, in order to make it effective, uses the language and conceptual scheme of Nyaya to show why Nyaya doesn't work. So when he's talking about the function of emptiness, he's talking about why you would deploy emptiness in a debate or in an argument. What are you doing when you try to convince yourself or somebody else that phenomena are empty? And his point is that you're not trying to show them that there's this special property that you didn't realize that things have, that they have, which is emptiness. What you're instead doing is you're engaging in a negation. You're showing that something you thought that things have, they don't have. That what you thought they had was intrinsic reality, independence, substantiality. And in fact, they are empty of that. So it's the difference between, this is something we started talking about at the very beginning, negations and positive phenomena. It's tempting to think that emptiness is one more positive phenomenon, like being blue or being round or being in Indonesia or being in Australia, one more positive phenomenon that things have, in which case you get yourself into all kinds of problems. And the Guardian is saying, no, 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 that's not what we're doing. We're not using it to tell you something new about something. We're telling you that to strip something away, something you had superimposed, namely intrinsic existence, is not there. Things are empty of that. Does that help, Anders?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that relates to the concept of a first person perspective, I guess.
Same thing. So you might have thought that there were two different ways you can know things. You can know things third personally, and or everybody always forgets second personally. And I've never understood why. But leave that one aside for a minute. I think that's actually a very deep one. But leave it aside for a moment. But there's third person knowledge and first person knowledge. And the first person knowledge is there because I have this special relationship to myself. And what emptiness does is say, guess what? There's no such special relation. You can drop that one. All there is experience or knowledge, not all of these different kinds. Things are empty of that. It's not as though I'm going to give you something new, namely a third person relation to yourself. I'm going to take something away, namely a special privileged relation, or what gets called in Buddhism reflexive awareness.
Thank you.
It's a negation, not a positive thing. Yeah. Thank you for that, Anders. Other questions about this issue? This is like the hardest one, I think. The very hardest thing to come to terms with is that we are subject to all of the illusions regarding the external world with regard to ourselves as well. That our knowledge of ourselves is not privileged. It's just as screwed up as our knowledge of everything else. Or as Tsongkhapa says, we'd already be Buddhas. Okay, then I'm going to move to the next one, which is a related question about karma and selflessness. Yeah.
I'd like to ask your comment related to this last question.
Yeah.
This related to my my practice experience.
Yeah.
And actually, we in our community is we custom to share our retreat experience. So this experience is already shared in our community, and even I wrote a book about this, so already published. So first, in my daily situation, usually I saw myself when I think, or even if I got facts emotionally trouble, I will think there is small Agus there, spirit, not here and now, but somewhere. There is a distance that Agus operated, perhaps like a victim or as object, like wandering about our own mind. And then during the practice, if I can collect my mind, especially in the retreat usually, I will realize that, hey, Agus is here, always here. This is Agus, not separated, not as a victim or not have a distance that thing separate with here and now. That's second mode.
Mhm.
And then in a retreat, once I experienced something like this, it was already a few days of sitting practice, and then in one session, I got very good sitting session, and then at that time, yeah, I sit very still, and then the mind already very collected. And then, yeah, something happened. I just kind of twitch in my muscle around my face. And then I can sense it. Already the body already very clear, and then transparent, almost disappear, the whole body. And then when I open my eyes, the visual experience like a TV screen that it's move near, then just pass on me. So I got I lost the sense of distance with my visual experience, and then so a kind of the distance, the ownership of my own body. I lost the claim of the body. So the body is very transparent. And then after that, a few hours after that, when I spoke to people with the audience, I just realized, hey, usually I always embrace, there is awkwardness when I speak with the audience. When I give a briefing, usually there is something that embrace or awkward. But at that time, I feel that the audience seen through me, like they were seeing the wall behind me. So there's no center of me. So at that time, the experience is, I know this is Agus. I know clearly this is Agus speaking, but I did not feel this is Agus. So at that time, I did not suffer, I did not feel, but the cognitive function perfectly. The memory, the knowledge.
Agus,
Yes.
give me one moment. I've got to quickly deal with something and I'll be right back. I promise.
Okay.
Ya udah, kita toilet break aja dulu ya Pak ya.
Oke.
Apa
Ya,
gimana?
toilet break. Boleh 3 menit toilet break.
Ya, teman-teman boleh toilet break, habis itu langsung balik ya. Oke,
Ya.
thank you.
Out now. Okay, I am back.
Yeah, they're having a toilet break right now for 3 minutes.
Okay.
Sorry, Professor Garfield. We took a biological toilet break.
Perfect. That's perfect.
We thought you were going to the toilet. I
No,
personally thought you
no,
were
I
going
had,
to the
I had, my dogs were begging to go outside, and they need to go to the toilet.
Oh, what kind of dog is that?
Border collies.
Ah,
Yeah. And
smart one.
they were barking. I thought I could wait a few minutes, but then I realized they were getting more and more insistent.
I love them. Border collie.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, so,
So now we could have Akus continue.
yeah, yeah. Border collie. It's interesting choice. I think related because I mean you're definitely a smart guy and a smart dog as well.
They're pretty wonderful. They're very special.
Oh, uh, is it you that choose the border collie in the first place, or was it?
We started with border collies when we lived in the United States, and we had a small
Ah,
farm with sheep and goats.
no wonder.
We needed somebody to work with us. And once you've started with border collies, you just, even though we don't live anything like that life now, you can't give up. They're such great companions.
I see. I understand. Well, that makes sense. You had a farm, so your dog really do the herding back then in the state.
Back then. But these
Okay.
dogs have never heard of anything at all. Catching frisbees and chasing sticks. They lead
Okay.
they lead a life of leisure, not a working dog's life.
Yeah, we kind of joke nowadays in Indonesia that dogs like the border collies and corgis, which is actually herding dogs, right?
Yep,
Nowadays they just sit around and sleep and eat.
exactly. Fortunately, we live on a beautiful beach, and they get to play on the beach every day, which they love.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Oke, Pak Agus.
Ya,
Monggo, Pak,
oke, aku
lanjut.
lanjut
Sorry,
ya.
Akers. My dogs are demanding my attention.
Okay, thank you. So after that experience, I report to our Sefu Guojun, and then he confirms this is there was a experience of Satori of no self. So my point is, at that experience, I did not feel as first person. I did not feel as a self.
Right.
But I knew clearly this is Agus. Everything operate perfectly. The memory, everything I knew, like just a normal. Even it was function perfectly because there is no trouble, emotion, etc. So the point is, know clearly, but did not feel the burden, the feeling, the emotion. I did not feel. So very light, transparent, but function perfectly. Is it related to the question? Okay, so that's my question. Thank you.
Probably, and of course, I'm not qualified to comment directly on your experience, which I won't do. But what I will say is, yes, we're trying to cultivate ourselves. This gets back to the previous questions, to be able to be aware of the illusions to which we're subject, to dispel subject-object duality, to perceive the world in a more expert way, to perceive ourselves in a more expert way. My own view is that part of the real depth that we get from the Buddhist tradition, and especially the Chan tradition, is that that's not a perspective beyond delusion. That's a clear perspective on delusion. So that we come to experience our illusions as illusions. There's an analogy that I use in another context when talking about Prasangika that might be useful here. It's the mirage analogy, which is used so often in Indian Buddhist literature, where we say the world is like a mirage. It's important to see that mirages are not unreal. They're real mirages. It's the water in the mirages that are unreal. And so if we imagine, three people driving down a highway on a hot day, and one of them's never been to a hot place before and says, oh my gosh, there's a puddle of water on the road, slow down. And another person is wearing Polaroid sunglasses, so they don't see the reflection at all. And they say, what are you talking about? But the third person who's used to these roads and is just wearing normal glasses says, yeah, I see it. It's just a mirage. Don't worry. The question is, who's got the right perspective here? It's that last one, right? If you don't see the mirage because you're wearing Polaroid sunglasses, you're not seeing illusion, and illusion is real. If you're seeing the mirage and thinking it's water, you're not just seeing illusion, you're overcome by illusion. But if you can see illusion as illusion, then you've got something right. And I think that's where there's a kind of realization, is to think that somehow we can get behind all illusion and just see the world and ourselves as we are. I think that's a joke. What we can do is understand that we're in illusion.
Agus, okay.
Other
Okay.
questions about this question? Okay, I'm going to move down to, this is
Okay.
totally connected. It's from Akas as well, about the trees from Hava.
Yeah, Professor Garfield, may I pause you there for a while?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to have a short practice, just maybe another 5 minutes.
Okay.
So before we continue later to the next questions, okay?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your understanding. Chiwiwi, please.
So we'll have a short pause, and let's take a deliberate shift in our posture, sitting in a way that will support the intention to be aware, choosing what's best for you in this moment. If you'd like, allowing the eyes to rest, perhaps by lowering the gaze or gently closing the eyes. Becoming aware of what is here right now. Noticing physical sensations, perhaps temperature in the body or the sense of contact. Noticing thoughts that are here, perhaps thoughts about what has just been discussed, a question, or a plan, or memory. Noticing moods and feelings that are here right now. Perhaps curiosity, excitement, joy, doubt, any feelings that might be here right now. And noticing if there are any impulses that may be present. Recognizing and acknowledging what is already here as they are. And now gathering and narrowing the attention to the sensation of breathing, wherever it feels more vividly in the body, perhaps in the abdomen. Tuning into this sensation for the full duration of the in-breath and the full duration of the out-breath. allowing the attention to rest on the sensation of the breathing in the body. When you're ready, gradually expanding and widening awareness to the whole body, becoming aware of the physical sensation of the whole body, the contact, posture, facial expression, sensation whenever and whatever it is. Seeing if there's a sense of openness as we expand our awareness. And bringing this expanded awareness and sense of openness into the next moments of our session. And now, if you close your eyes, you can gently open your eyes. We are coming back to this Zoom session. Okay, back to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. That was a really good break. Okay. Practice method from Akus. Akus asks, continuing from question number 6, after cognitively believing in the concept of the three swabhavas, or the three natures, does the practice become to disbelieve the first nature by using a question like, what is Wu, or through Mochao, which allows the third nature to be unveiled? Could you frame it this way? And I would say, yes, you could frame it that way, but it wouldn't be the only way to frame it. So let me work on that. Just a second. I'm trying to change my view right now, but lost it. Okay, because I can't see everybody anymore. I've gone to a spotlight view, and I'm trying to find the gallery view on this. There we go. I got it. Okay. All right, now I can see everybody again. Good. So, yes, on the one hand, the goal of meditation is to see through the parakalpita svabhava, the imagined nature. Because the imagined nature is subject-object duality. It's an illusion. But coming back to the analogy I gave before, seeing through is not the same thing as not seeing. So let me again give another really fun analogy that is Vasubandhu's own analogy when he introduces the three natures. He does it through the example of a magic show. So you go to see a magic show and the magician casts a spell and waves their arms and you see an elephant that's not really there and he's used as a prop, some sticks, right? Boom, there's the elephant. The question now is, do you want to not see the elephant because it's not there? Well, if you went to a magic show and the elephant and the magician said, presto, and you didn't see the elephant, you'd want your money back, right? You actually want to see that elephant. That's what you paid for. You wanted the illusion. There's a point to an illusion. On the other hand, what you don't want to do is run from the hall saying, oh my God, there's an elephant here. It's going to trample me. You want to see the illusion and know that it's an illusion. And I think the point about Tri Swabhava is that, yes, there's a kind of vanishing of the imagined nature of the parakalpita, but it's not a complete vanishing. It's a vanishing of your confidence in it, of your belief in it, and a recognition that it really is just illusory. More and more, I think that one of the deepest messages of Buddhism is that as human beings, we are condemned to live in an illusory world. That's okay. The important thing is to recognize the illusions and to recognize the pervasiveness of that illusion. If the illusion goes away completely, if we were to get beyond the illusion, we wouldn't be able to communicate with one another. We wouldn't be able to be effective agents for change. You've got to be able to see illusion, see that it's an illusion, see through the illusion. All of that's important. Without the illusion, there's nothing to see through. And, that's one of the reasons why I think, in Madhyamaka, we're taught so much that, conventional reality is empty of any intrinsic existence. But that doesn't mean that it's unreal. It just means that it's deceptive. And deceptive conventional reality is where we live. So if you can't see deceptive phenomena, then you can't really live effectively. But if you're deceived by deceptive phenomena, then you're going to live pretty badly. Does that make sense? Nagarjuna, at one point in Mula Madhyamaka Karaka, says everything is that's deceptive is false. Nirvana is non-deceptive. That's why it's true. Well, that's right. But when we say that everything that's deceptive is false, we don't mean that it's non-existent. We mean that it's tricky. And you've got to be able to see those deceptive things in order to understand what the trick is. Okay, Akis continues, asking about the consummate nature. That's the third nature, parinishpana. He says, is it a cognitive understanding, a direct experience, or both? If it's both, does it assume that the person has previously learned the concept of Trisvabhava? If they haven't, wouldn't it be impossible to experience it in accordance with that conceptual narrative? Sure. The important thing to understand about the Trisvabhava and Trinisvabhava framework is that it is a framework to be taught. It's not the way the world is. It's a framework through which we can understand the world, as all conceptual frameworks are. So if we go back to the place where the Trisvabhava and the Trinisvabhava are introduced, that's in the Sandhinirmochana Sutra, the sutra unraveling the thought. That's the fundamental sutra for the Yogacara tradition. And it's in the 7th chapter of that sutra that we get everything, well, the 6th and 7th chapter, that everything gets going. The 6th chapter gives us the 3 Nisvabhava, the 7th chapter gives us the Trisvabhava, 3 naturelessnesses and 3 natures. And in the 7th chapter, when the 3 naturelessnesses, the 3 emptinesses are introduced, it's done this way. The Bodhisattva Paramartha Samagata says to the Buddha, he says, hey, Buddha, you taught that everything was empty. What did you have in mind? And the Buddha said, I had 3 things in mind. I had the idea that things were empty with respect to characteristic. That's the nisvabhava, the naturelessness that corresponds to the parakalpita. I taught that things are empty with respect to to origination. That's the one that corresponds to the dependent nature. And I taught that things were ultimately empty. That's the one that corresponds to the parinishpana svabhava. Now, in presenting them that way, the Buddha is presenting them in order of understanding. That's one of the 2 ways they're presented. So the idea is you can only really understand the dependent nature if you've already understood the imagined nature. You can only understand the consummate nature if you already understand the dependent nature. So these are 3 modes of understanding the world. Now, it's important to see that this doesn't mean that things first have an imagined nature, and then they have a dependent nature, and then they have a consummate nature. It means that things always have these 3 natures. But these natures are natures that, in virtue of which they can be seeded a particular way by sentient beings. So to have an imagined nature is for sentient beings to imagine that you exist in a particular way. To have a dependent nature is for sentient beings to be able to understand that you originate in a particular way. And to have a consummate nature means for sentient beings to understand that you have no nature at all. Completely empty. There's another way of presenting the three natures, and that's the way that says the dependent nature. And this is important because of the Sanskrit grammar, right? So when we say parikalpita and parinishpana, we mean having been imagined or having been completed. But paratantra, the dependent nature, is just a nominal construction. It's the way things are. So from a metaphysical point of view, the most fundamental of the three is the middle one, the paratantra, just dependent origination. But dependent origination can appear to sentient beings as independent, dually existent things. That's the imagined nature. Or it can appear to sentient beings as completely empty. That's the parinishpana, or the completed nature. So when we think of it in that sense, again, things have these three natures, but to see things in terms of these three natures, you've got to understand the three natures. And that's why the Buddha presents them as a conceptual framework. It's one way of understanding things. And I think this is super important when we think about the relationship between Madhyamaka and Yogacara, between the second turning of the wheel of Dharma and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. Because we read in a lot of Madhyamaka texts that the second turning is definitive, and the third turning is for people who were too confused by the second turning. So the Yogacara is just Mahayana for dummies. And then we hear in the third turning sutras that the second turning was provisional, and the third turning, the final one, is definitive. The second turning is Mahayana for dummies. And I think we need to get past that sectarian kind of battle. There's a beautiful way that His Holiness the Dalai Lama often teaches the relationship between the second and the third turnings. And I think it's really nice, and it goes way back to the Tibetan scholar Rendawa from the 13th and 14th century. And the idea is that Madhyamaka teaches emptiness from the side of objects of knowledge. It teaches what the objects are to be empty. And Yogacara teaches emptiness from the side of from the subject of knowledge, from subjectivity. So one way to look at this is, if you read Madhyamaka and you see that everything is empty, but mistakenly appears to have intrinsic existence, then one question you ought to ask is, where does that stupid mistake come from? Why do we superimpose intrinsic existence on things that lack it? Independence on things that are merely dependent? Selves on things that lack selves? And the answer to that is given by Yogacara. That's because of the way our minds work. Our minds work by taking in input from a causal stream, the dependent nature, and then immediately projecting subject-object duality on that, giving us the imagined nature. But our minds can come to recognize that we've done that. And in recognizing that deceptiveness, stop that superimposition and simply see things as empty, dependently originated phenomena. And so one of them gives an account of the nature of our knowledge, the other an account of our cognitive processes. And they're completely consistent when you see them that way. That's why I like to teach both of them all the time. It's most important to teach Yogacharans to Madhyamikas. And it's most important to teach Madhyamaka to Yogacharans, because you want to dispel the idea that they're just a bunch of dummies over there who can't get the real thing. Some of you may have seen my Yogacara teachings into Tupan Chidran's monastery and saw how kind of very, resistant many of the students were there to the idea that Yogacara could possibly have anything true about it. And that's why I chose to teach Yogacara to them, because I knew they were Madhyamikas and they needed to be shaken up a little bit. If I were going to a monastery of Yogacharans, I'd be teaching Madhyamaka for the same reason. Okay, now we get to Zen finally, to koans and rationality. And this is from Weitan. It's a very good question. Douglas Hofstadter in Gödel Escher Bach does something that a lot of people do when they try to talk about koans in Zen. a lot of people say, oh, here's what koans are meant to do. They're meant to make absolutely no sense. And so you think about them and you stop trying to make sense and stop trying to think rationally. And they break the rational mind and take you someplace beyond rationality. I think you've got to think twice about that analysis of what a koan is doing. And if your koan practice is like that, then I think that you might need a psychiatrist as well as a Roshi. Because if you allow yourself to become completely irrational, you're not going to understand anything. And if you give thought away, then, as I say, you're giving illusion away. You're giving the one pramana that we have to get at reality. So you have to be careful about this. They are meant to do something very radical, but we have to think about what that is. Remember that gongan in Chinese, it means a case, a public case, something to consider. And so gongans or koans are asking us to consider something and to see what we can learn from it. In the way that a judge considers a case in precedent to say, what do we learn from this decision about how this particular case should be handled? So a gongan is like a legal precedent. Think about this, then think about other things in that way. Now, they're meant to be difficult, that's for sure. I think of gongans not as ways to get beyond rationality, but ways to get you to think hyper-rationally. They're like really good Zen crossword puzzles or Sudokus. You've got to think really carefully through them. And then you can say, I've learned a way of thinking. And so let's consider a couple of examples of koans that you may have played with at some point and may have thought about. These are sort of, beginning koans, but koans that are really easy to see what's going on and how you would think about that. Think about, for instance, the koan of the man in the tree. So you've got a man in the tree and he's hanging onto a very high branch by his teeth, right? And he can't reach the branch, and if he falls down, he's going to die, right? And so he's asked, why did Bodhidharma come from the West, right? And now, so what happens if he doesn't answer? He's broken his vow. If he does answer, he dies. And so you have to think about this, right? What does this mean to be in this kind of quandary where if you speak, you're going to screw things up, and if you don't speak, you're going to screw things up? This is obviously a koan that is presupposing, right? I mean, this is also some people forget about Zen and the Chan tradition. People say, oh, it's this transmission of teaching outside of words and letters. If that's true, why did Chan masters and Zen masters write so many words and letters? It's the Buddhist school that has produced the largest literature, right? So think again about that paradox, right? But also think about the fact that when you read great Chan scholars, they're presupposing a deep background in sutra literature. And this koan is a reference to a very particular sutra. And I'll bet everybody here knows which one that is. Should I give away the answer? Or are you all going to say it at once? It's referring to the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra. This is all about the Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra. And it's all about a particular chapter in that sutra. Actually, about two moments in that sutra. A moment in the 7th chapter and a moment in the 9th chapter. In the 7th chapter, Shariputra, you'll all remember, gets turned into a girl in one of the world's earlier gender reassignment surgeries by the goddess. And she asked, and Shariputra is asked, please, can you explain what emptiness is like, right? And Shariputra says, Shariputra says silent. He doesn't give an answer. He's quiet, like the man in the tree, not opening his mouth, right? And the goddess says, come on, you're supposed to be the foremost of the wise. You're supposed to be the smartest monk who's ever lived. Say something. And he says, how can I say something? Emptiness is inexpressible. And she reprimands him and says, come on, the Buddha spent years expressing emptiness, and you can't even say a single syllable, right? Saying nothing doesn't do anything. Imagine, you enroll in a college course, right? And maybe an art history course. And the teacher in the front just stays completely silent. And you say, well, why aren't you saying anything? And she says, art is so beautiful, it transcends language. The best lecture I can give is just to be silent. You're going to drop that and take another course, right? You want to actually learn something. But in the ninth chapter, Vimalakirti remained silent after Manjushri says, non-duality is beyond any word, so it can't be expressed, and all of these expressions are dualistic. The only way to explain non-duality is by not saying anything. And then Vimalakirti says nothing. Look at the difference between the silence of Vimalakirti and the silence of Shariputra. Shariputra's silence was the silence of stupidity. And Vimalakirti's silence was made possible by Manjushri's explanation. If Manjushri hadn't said that, Vimalakirti's silence would have just been Shariputra's silence, right? So whether you're saying something or not saying something doesn't depend on what comes out of your mouth or doesn't. It depends on the entire context in which that discussion is happening. The Vimalakirti Nirdesha Sutra says, if you want to understand why language can be meaningful, look at the context. If you want to understand why silence is necessary, look at the context. In this koan, we instinctively focus on the guy in the tree, right? And what's going to happen if he opens his mouth. But what the koan is about is, it's not about whether you talk or don't talk. What's important is the context in which you talk. If you're clamping onto a tree, not talking might be a good thing. But if you're not, talking might be a good thing. But looking at his decision is the wrong thing to look at. The koan tells us when you're trying to decide whether something can be said or not, look at the situation. Don't look at the thing itself. Don't be Shariputra and say, oh, emptiness, inexpressible, I won't say anything. Like looking at the other tree and saying emptiness or Bodhidharma, if I say something, I'll die. The koan is about context. Or take another really easy koan, the koan about the flag. So two monks are arguing. One says the wind is moving. The other one says the flag is moving. And they ask their Roshi, who's right? And he says, your mind is moving. Now, what's that about? That's about what we've just been talking about, the parakalpata, right? He says each of them is trying to assign a positive characteristic, a specific feature to the flag itself, independent of anything. Is it, or the movement itself? Is the movement itself wind, or is it a flag? Which is the right parakalpata? And the response is pay attention to Paratantra. Pay attention to the causes and conditions that lead you even to ask this question. And those causes and conditions are not the wind, and they're not the flag. They're the movement of your own mind. Now, each of those is a rational thing. And so each of them is a case. And so the first one tells us, next time somebody asks me to describe the inexpressible, what's going to be the most effective, the most useful thing to do? Do I give an analytical philosophical discussion of that? Do I just point to it? Do I give them something else to read? What do I do? Think about what their state of mind is, what their question is, what the context is. The second one tells me, the moment I look at something outside and I think, now I see what's going on, or look at something inside for that matter and say, now I see how things are. Step back and say, what am I really seeing? I'm really seeing how my mind has constructed how things are. So each of those is a case that allows us to proceed in other cases in that way. But in order to do each one, we've got to think through each one and come to see it that way before we can see other things that way. So yes, koans are supposed to be hard, and they're supposed to be to require from us the hard work that leads to a moment of insight. But that moment of insight isn't a moment of irrationality. It's a moment of very deep rationality. And I think the only people who would say that koans are supposed to break reason and break logic and get us beyond rationality are people who have never actually worked through a koan long enough to be transformed by it. That's what I think. That's why we have so many koan commentaries, right? And that's why there are cheat sheets, right? I mean, that's why all these cheat sheets have come up. Here's what you say if you're called in for session on this koan, right? Okay, does that help a little bit? So I think koan practice is really useful. It's really hard, but it gives us these examples of ways to see things that we wouldn't have seen, where we wouldn't have seen them before. Now, personal question. This is the last question now. Oh, that's amazing, which is good because we're almost at the end. If this were to be my final encounter with the Indonesian Chan community, which we hope it's not, I hope it's not too, what specific personal instruction would you offer us? I don't have vast life experience, just based on whatever I know, but which is very small, keeping in mind your unique causes and conditions. Well, I know so little of your unique causes and conditions. I do know that whatever they are, they brought you to Buddha Dharma and they brought you to the Chan lineage, and that's a very great thing. So you're people who have accumulated an enormous amount of merit and wisdom in the past to bring you to this. That's all I know. And again, I'll come back to some of the most important things. I mean, whenever we're teaching Buddha Dharma, whenever you're teaching Buddha Dharma, whenever I'm teaching Buddha Dharma, all we're doing, trying to do, is to pass down with as much fidelity as possible something that's been passed down to us. And we always do that with the anxiety that we're somehow going to distort it or somehow going to do it less well than our teacher did it for us. But we always have to, what our teachers have given us is a very precious gift. And they've given it to us in order to pass it down, not in order to be afraid. So you have to have the courage to pass it down and the humility to know that you might screw it up. So having said that, I'll just once again pass along maybe the two most important things, maybe, as I say, because it's always hard to know what the most important are, that my teacher taught me. The first one I began with at the very beginning of the session. Every syllable of Buddha Dharma is about ethics. That when we're talking about emptiness, we're talking about emptiness in order to make ourselves better ethical agents. When we're talking about illusion, we're talking about illusion in order to make ourselves better ethical agents. When we're talking about whether nirvana is unconditioned or conditioned, we're talking about that in order to gain insights that will make us better ethical agents. If we always approach every text, every teaching, every meditation session, every retreat with our minds firmly fixed on, now I'm trying to make myself a better person, then we're going to succeed. If we're doing that with any other motivation, then the whole thing is pointless. There's just not even a reason to do it. Much better to sit and listen to some good music or have a cup of coffee with a friend or whatever you want to do. You can do something that's got value. This only has value if it has ethical value. So that's the first thing that I would say. And I say that always because I think people forget that easily. They pay so much attention to what we characterize as the wisdom side that they forget that the wisdom side is only there for the ethics side. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that we often, and I've said this several times during this teaching, think that when we're practicing Buddhism or when we're studying Buddhism, we're trying to make illusions disappear so that we can see reality as it is. That is fundamental confusion, because what emptiness means is there is no way that reality is as it is. That's what reality is empty of. That includes external phenomena and the phenomena in our own mind. The moment you say to yourself, I'm now seeing this as it is, I've now got it, I've now got direct experience of this. The moment you say that, you've completely fallen away from anything that makes sense in Buddha Dharma. What we need to be able to do is to see illusion as what it is, as illusion, and to understand how we're sucked in by it and how we cannot be sucked in by it. But to recognize that even when we see that, we're seeing yet another illusion. And I think that's extraordinarily important. There's no bottom at which we can say, now I've cut through all of the illusion and I'm directly seeing reality. The moment you think you're directly seeing anything, you're back into illusion. So to recognize the deep pervasiveness of illusion in our lives, that we have not evolved to be perfect detectors of reality. We've evolved to constantly think that we're perfect detectors of reality. And if we can shed that illusion, then we're okay. And that makes us a better person. Because the moment you say, that person is a real asshole and I can't stand them, you have to ask yourself, now I've said how they are, and I've used that as an excuse to treat them badly. What have I forgotten? I've forgotten that whatever I see of them is illusory, and that the whole point of my practice is to stop treating people badly, step back. So when I hold on to those two ideas, those are the two ideas that I would like to try to transmit to the extent that I can. And with that, I thank you all very, very much for 11 great questions, for some wonderful practice time, and a wonderful conversation with you. And I hope that we will see each other again, maybe even in Australia or in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Garfield. So actually, we have another 7 minutes. So I would like just throw into the forum if anyone got any follow-up questions or anything. Oke, Pak Agus, Ko Yohan, yang dua orang yang kontak Prof duluan.
Questions? Okay. Oh, thank you. I really did enjoy my time with you. It's been really fun. And it's been great questions. And thank you for sending them to me in advance, because it gave me at least a little bit of time to think about them, which is always also useful. Yeah.
Jay, perhaps this, from Mahayana point of view, the last one or the whole session, Mahayana frequently see that, for instance, that you mentioned about nirvana is not different with samsara, and then also the last one, that the whole our practice is to see reality as it is, or so basically about seeing the reality. So and then also related to my previous question that I asked, like after we convince ourselves cognitively about the three nature or yogacara or even madhyamika, and then the practice is to disbelief. So this question, or I would like to see from a bit different perspective. My question, actually, the context is focusedly on the formal practice. So it is in the sitting practice, or intensive practice, or formal practice. It is not in a daily situation or daily practice, or daily we interact with people, with life or situation. When in a very formal or intensive practice, or sitting particularly, if we refer to early Buddhist texts, they rarely talk about appearance or daily appearance, or to imagine nature. They rarely talk about that. So their focus is to experience the Four Noble Truths, to experience the Third Noble Truth, cessations, and then to savor perhaps the third fetters first, and then basically their goal is to sever the 10
Fetus.
fetters.
Yep.
So in that case, in our intensive practice, in our sitting practice, we do not bother about appearance of. We just want to get a deep sitting practice, and then to experience the cessation or experience the sever of every fetter, third, and then the fourth,
Fine.
fifth, or everything. So that the very focused and very deliberate. And perhaps one also I would like to refer Bhikkhu Bodhi have a very long time article that about non-dual. He talked directly, explicitly that in our Theravada we see everything as dualistic. Not we reject the view of non-dual, like nirvana as samsara or samsara nirvana. So how about that? Say, thank you.
Well, there are a lot of different ways to think about practice and a lot of different aspects to practice within Buddhism. In some
Sorry,
traditions,
may I interrupt you?
Yep.
So at another point, I'm not very familiar with this. I just knew it just recent years, that it turned out in our Mahayana view there is two kind of nirvana or something like that. So there's a different view about nirvana compared with the early Buddhist text nirvana. So is it also related to that? Yeah, thank you.
Well, that's nirvana with remainders and nirvana without remainders. And all of that is pretty technical stuff about what happens at the attainment of Buddhahood, with the idea of whether one remains in samsara or not, right? So let's not worry about that too much. None of us are that close to that we need to worry about it. I want to worry more about the notion of practice, and to say that there's a lot of different ways of thinking about practice. You can think about practice as what you do on a cushion, or you can think about practice as what you do every time you breathe. And I tend to gravitate myself more to the latter view. So I'll tell you a Dharma talk that the Venerable Kamtul Rinpoche, a great Tibetan master, gave to a group of my students once. And he was talking about the Eightfold Path. And he explained all 7 parts of the path except for mindfulness. And then he said, now for a moment, what I'd like you to do is practice all of the 7 things that I've just taught you. Right speech, right livelihood, right action, so forth. See, you're doing that. That's great. Now I'd like you to, nobody's told a lie, nobody's hurt anybody, nobody's gone to work for the military. It's all good. So now I'd like you to practice all of those things for one more moment. And one more moment. So now all you need is right mindfulness to keep yourself practicing those things at every moment, and you'll attain awakening. Because your practice is something you do at every moment of your life. The only question is whether you do it well or poorly. So that's a very different view of what practice is about than, say, formal practice, as you've put it. I think both views are important, but I think that trying to circumscribe what constitutes practicing Buddha Dharma is very dangerous. It's a very capacious doctrine that can be practiced in many ways.
Okay, Prof. Garfield, I just got one question I missed earlier. So somebody was actually asking, is analytical meditations is the same or similar with the Vipassana practice?
Vipassana practice is one kind of analytic meditation, yes. When we talk vipassana, means insight, so doing things. A very specific kind of practice aimed at gaining insight is a kind of analytical meditation. There are many kinds. Vipassana is one of those kinds. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. That's great. So, okay. So, yes. So I think we are at the end of our sessions. It's 12:32. So, I think we're going to close the sessions with another sitting practice. So, GWW, please.
Thank you all.
Thank you ya nanti, Pak.
And I will leave you at this point. Take care.
Prof. Garfield, then if you are going to leave first, then please accept our humble gratitude and thank you
My
for your
gratitude as well.
time, for your teachings, and for your wisdoms. Again, I believe all of us hope that this won't be the last time, because
I do as well.
I love your jokes and I love your dogs as well. That was a that was a necessary disturbance, I would say. Disturbance in a way.
Life is
And
like that.
and
Maybe will read in English, so
yeah, so if
we
you
will
would
ask Prof to stay just for 5 minutes more.
okay,
Yeah.
please
Yeah.
please join us in our closing
Okay.
practice. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's have a short mindful checkout. So please sit in a way that is quite comfortable and can support us for the intention to be aware. And if you'd like, allowing the eyes to rest, perhaps by lowering the gaze or closing the eyes gently. Becoming aware of what is happening right now. Noticing any physical sensations, thoughts, moods or feelings, or impulses, if there are. Recognizing and acknowledging what is already here right now. And now, gathering and narrowing our attention to the sensation of breathing, where it feels more vivid in the body. Perhaps in the abdomen, allowing the attention to rest in the sensation of breathing in the body. Tuning in to the full duration of the in-breath and the full duration of the out-breath. Allowing the body to breathe naturally. Whenever ready, expanding the awareness to the whole body. Becoming aware of the physical sensations in the body. They are already here, right now. Perhaps feeling the contact, the posture, facial expression. Becoming aware of the body, the whole body. Sitting and breathing. And perhaps now inviting a sense of appreciation to the fact that we are here together right now, the causes and conditions that allow us to study together, to have discussion about the Dharma. Recognizing the thoughts, feelings, and body sensation that arise with this sense of appreciation. And perhaps inviting an intention to dedicate the merits, the study, to benefit all sentient beings. And whenever you're ready, you can take a deeper in-breath. And on the out-breath, gently open the eyes. Perhaps becoming aware of our facial expression. Maybe can put a smile to each other and express our gratitude to our professor. Thank you for coming
Professor
here,
Garfield.
joining our group today.
Thank you all.
Love all your analogies and everything. It's just great. So great.
Take care.
Take care and please keep in touch with Pak Agus and Johan.